I'm super excited to have Alberto Savoia here tonight. His talk is Pretotyping. Make sure you're building the right it before you build it right. He's currently a consultant and innovation agitator at Pretotype Labs. That's his company. And before that, he was an engineering director at Google. Before that, he was CTO and co-founder of a startup, and he actually was at Google briefly before that. So he was at Google, he left to do a startup and came back. He did a startup before that, and before that he had various roles at Sun. So without further ado, I'm going to switch it over to Alberto. Let's give him a warm welcome. Thanks for coming.
Thank you for coming.
Thanks.
Oh, better move the ball. Again, thank you for coming. Those are the hashtag. Yeah, tweet. We like that. I want to thank Dan for organizing this, and you already mentioned the sponsors, so I really appreciate this. I give a lot of talks, but never for $5. So you guys are getting a really good deal, especially since you're getting free food and beer. So basically, my stuff is free. So even if you get nothing out of it, you're in good shape. So we're here to talk about Pretotyping, and I want to give credit where credit is due because I'm lucky to be the one presenting these ideas. But I really didn't invent them or discover them. I just put them together. Initially during a period of 4 years at Google, and I'll explain that. And then I got a chance to refine them at Stanford, where I occasionally teach, and just last year I had my first 3-week class called The Power of Pretotyping, and hopefully I get to do it again. And I also put it into practice with large companies that want to innovate like a startup and go to market like grown-ups. So I'm lucky enough to present these ideas, but don't think that I invented these things. I just put them together. Usually I give them cool, interesting names so they're memorable and try to make them practical. So I'm going to start with my experience. As you can probably tell from my accent, I wasn't born here. How many of you were not born in the US? Okay, good. So, but I was born in Rome, Italy, and you know how some people say I'm a woman trapped in a man's body or vice versa? When I landed at SFO and came to Silicon Valley, I realized I'm a Silicon Valley boy, in a Roman body, and I decided not to go back. So I called my mother and I said, "Mamma non torno," and she's still crying, I think. But it worked out well. So after a while, I did my first startup, as you're supposed to do around here. We were very lucky. We raised $3 million in Series A. I was a co-founder, and 18 months later, somebody bought us for $100 million. So I thought, wow, this is so easy. I called my friends in Italy. Hey, Mario, come over. It's good. It's easy. So after spending 1 year and 1 day at the acquiring company, I decided to do something else. So I left, and I joined another little startup called Google. And at the time, I was in charge of a bunch of little projects. I had about half of engineering, which was about, say, 100 people at the time, including a little thing called AdWords. And so that kind of worked out pretty well, looks good in the resume, and I thought, well, I'm pretty good. So I figured, Google is going to make it with or without me. So I kind of set a goal. Look, when AdWords get to about $1 million per day, I can leave. So I left to do another startup. And this time, of course, I thought, $3 million is chump change, right? I had a successful exit, I had more experience, a Google pedigree, et cetera, et cetera. So to make a long story short, for my second startup, I raised a total of $25 million from Sequoia and NEA. And we had this product called Agitator. I'm not going to bother you about the detail. It was a software testing and development tool. Won a bunch of awards, worked great. And I was starting to think, I'm really, really good. However, this product that worked great and won all those awards, somehow all that greatness had trouble translating into sales. And so 5 years later, we found ourselves in a nasty situation where, we raised $25 million, but, sold $23, $24 million, so that didn't work out. And so eventually we sold the company for pennies on the dollars, and my reaction this time was a little different. Are you familiar with the acronym? I invented it. Why the failure? I thought, look, I had more money, more experience, the best VCs in the Valley. All my engineers were good. All of them got offers from Google. So what the hell happened here? How come I failed? So that really kind of troubled me. And I was lucky enough to be taken back at Google, where in theory I was an engineering director. But I remember they asked me a question. They said, hey, Alberto, you were here 5 years ago. What has changed? The company had gone from like, I don't know, 500 to 15,000 people. And I thought, all right, all the things that I thought would be gone, like free food, free massages, playing volleyball without a shirt in the middle of the day on a sand, volleyball court, all those things were still there. But I realized, what changed? The innovation per Googler kind of dropped, and you have many more products that you launched that were not successes. So my reward, for being honest, was to be put on a task force. If you're kind of an engineer, that's the last thing you want to do. So it was, but fortunately, how it works with task force, an innovation task force, as it works with most task forces, I was the only one who did any task or had any force. So after a couple of months, I was alone in this room. People say, I'm sorry, I cannot come. I have my real job. So I was there and had a real chance to study. To study innovation and, more importantly, innovation failure. By the way, feel free to take notes, but I will send copies of all of these slides so you can have access to it. So the title I created for myself was Innovation Agitator and a Student of Failure. And during that period, I put together this corpus of work, which I came up with a name for called Pretotyping, which I'm here to share with you today. And I started to practice it myself and show it to people, and people liked it, and they told other people. So I ended up spending more time talking than doing. And then some Stanford professors came and they saw it and they said, you have to come and teach this at Stanford. So to make a long story short, I was spending so much time teaching people how to do this that my boss, for whom I was an engineering director, said, Alberto, are you sure you don't want to take a sabbatical and go this full time to get it out of your system? So I said, yeah, that was about 2.5 years ago, and I'm still doing it. So I'm, I guess, on unofficial, unpaid, unauthorized sabbatical from Google to do this, and teaching it to groups like this, companies, and almost every week at Google and occasionally at Stanford. All right? So that's the introduction. Those of you who raise your hand say you're entrepreneurs, I still am one of yours. I still practice it. And I want to make sure that whatever you're doing, if you can take one thing today, is the important thing, the most important thing is the law of failure, because this is the foundation of my work. And the law of failure comes in two parts. The first one is pretty depressing, and then it goes down from there. So the first part says, most new products will fail in the market. Now, one of the things that they teach you at Google is, to always back whatever you say with data. Data beats opinion. So, fortunately, there is tons of data on failure. And here's a study from Nielsen research of about 25,000 products. Every year, Nielsen looks at all the new product launches and tracks what happens to them. And as you can see, about 80% of them failed, were canceled, or somehow disappointed. People usually ask me, Alberto, what year is that? Frankly, I already forgot. It doesn't matter. Every year is like this, right? Little changes, but the numbers are basically the same. Most new products fail. So, if you're trying to do a product that's not very ambitious, just a new product in general, you have, 1 in 5 chance of succeeding. So I call this the wheel of failure. And it's something you should keep in mind as you have a new product, because you, as you'll see, you are not special. You will fail. So these are pretty bad odds. If you go and look and you try to be innovative, the odds are even worse. All those products fail, even though 80% or more of them were not even innovative, right? Coca-Cola introduces, Diet Coke, and Pepsi introduce Diet Pepsi. Just copies of other products, and the breakthrough products, the real innovation, are a very small number. So I look at what are the chances of failure for really innovative, different products, and what do you think? They're much greater. In fact, for the innovative products, the wheel of failure looks approximately like this, right? And you allocate for some failure 4 or 5, but pretty much you run out of money and time if you try to do something very different. So I told you it was depressing, but it gets even more depressing. So the second part of the law of failure is this: most new products will fail, even if they're competently executed. So think about it. This means that how good you are, how successful you've been in the past, has very little relevance on what your chances for success are in the future. And this is really depressing. Again, I back everything I say with data, the same data that I use in drawing this conclusion. So I'll give you some of my favorite examples, and I could be here all night with fun examples. New Coke or Crystal Pepsi. Who remember when this was introduced? Some of you may be too young, right? About 10, 15 years ago. Now, do Coca-Cola and Pepsi know how to make money and market soft drinks. Absolutely, they're the experts, right? And they did the market research, they did everything. They launched this product, great hoopla, everybody knew about them, and then they were on the shelf for about 3 months and then disappeared. How many people here have seen the movie John Carter? Lots of nerds, so I expect. See, even among the nerds who know about John Carter, it didn't sell. Now, does Disney know how to make and market movies? Yes, and yet they kind of blew it big time. Google Wave. How many of you were excited 3 or 4 years ago when Google Wave was launched and they thought, I want to get an invitation? I had people begging, Alberto, you're at Google, please give me an invitation. My life won't be the same unless I have Google Wave. So people use it once or twice, went nowhere. Iridium satellite phones. You know, this is not interesting because it's big, $6 billion. These people were rocket scientists. Motorola, who was kind of the leader in this kind of telecommunication, was involved. Rocket scientists, so very smart people, a complete flop. I think they were acquired for something like $20 million. Now, the interesting thing is that they hired a market research firm to calculate the market for satellite phones, and they predicted, these analysts, you will have approximately 43 million users. You know at their peak how many users they actually had signed up for the Iridium satellite phone?
50K?
Excuse me?
50K?
50K, yeah, a little less than 50K, like 50,000. So talk about making big mistakes. But my favorite example of all time is the Segway. Now, remember when the Segway came out, was, first was called Ginger for some strange reason. I was expecting some strange product. No, it came out, it was on the cover of Wired magazine, Time magazine. Everybody knew about the Segway. People thought it was going to change the way that cities are designed. Architects were already throwing away all the plans and drawing new plans. Now, who was behind it? Dean Kamen, one of our best inventors, before the Segway, invented the portable kidney dialysis machine. Talk about something helpful. And who recognizes the guy there on the far right? John Doerr of Kleiner Perkins. It's hard to think of a better known, more successful VCs. So this guy, imagine this a gigantic market. Everybody bought in. Now, tell me, who uses Segways these days? Okay, mall cops and lazy tourists, as far as I know. That's the market. It was going to be, cities are going to be redesigned to allocate, to accommodate this, and now you only see mall cops. Now, how many people have tried the Segway? Does it work well? It's pretty amazing, right? It does what it's supposed to do. So it's not a matter they didn't build it well. It's not a matter they didn't have enough money. It's not a matter that the investors behind it didn't have business savvy. They just built the wrong a product that the market didn't care about. So this is my point for saying, good execution and having experience doesn't help. At this point, I always get a lot of resistance because nobody wants to admit failure. So they say, well, Alberto, so what? All companies have some failure. So again, I went back to my research, and the key is that it's not some failures, it's failure all over the freaking place. There's a lot of it. Fortunately, for all of my research, I have to do little work because it's all there. So a product manager at Microsoft had fun a few years ago and went on Pinterest and created a Pinterest page called the Google Graveyard with all the failed Google products. Now, due to lack of vertical space, I didn't put them on, but there are hundreds, right? We'll go down to the basement. Some of them you recognize like waves. Some of them, never even raised to the level of consciousness. Of course, at Google, we don't take hits from Microsoft without, shooting back. So one of our product managers created the Microsoft Morgue, which is an even more failed product. And I put this here, but not to make fun. Yeah, you recognize. Some of you worked on those. Sorry, I will inevitably offend some people today. That's part of my job. Now, we can make fun and laugh at Google or Microsoft, but we're talking about two of the most successful companies ever, right? So it's not just some failure, it's a lot of failures. So after people that I back them into a corner with data about failure, they say, well, okay, but there's one person that's immune from failure. Who's that? Apple, right? So yes, Steve Jobs. And so my first response is, yes, maybe I can grant you that, but you're not Steve Jobs, nor is anybody in this room. Even Steve Jobs is not Steve Jobs anymore. And furthermore, even too soon. But even Steve Jobs, whom I love dearly, whose products I use all the time, you know, had a few flops. You know, the Lisa, the Newton, of which I will make some fun and next. So the bottom line, even if you're Steve Jobs, you're not completely immune to failure. All right, so we talked about big companies. What about startup failure rates? Any guesses? What percentage of startups fail, say, within 5 years? 97.8. Yeah, good. Great accuracy. Now, actually, somebody has actually studied, you know, instead of just spewing a number out of their head, but, you know, it feels like 97.8. So, you know, there was a study done, and about 75% of them failed. But probably the number is bigger, closer to what you said, because a lot of VCs, they bury their debts very quietly. Right? There's no mention of my failed startup anywhere in Sequoia's pages. It's as if we never existed. So here's, actually, I like some examples. Let's see, who recognizes, I'll show the logo. Color. $41 million, you know, they were gonna be the next Instagram. The results were pretty black and white. No, it was a sepia outcome. Again, if you work for Color, no offense. I made fun of myself first of everybody. Pay by touch, $340 million. Apparently nobody paid and nobody touched them. Search me, $43 million. Nobody searched them. You know, they were probably hoping to be frisked. Nothing happened. Quill, anybody here from Quill? You know, was in this area. Some extra Google. It was supposed to pronounce Quill. No, didn't go anywhere. Boo.com, this is European, I have to include some European, you know, kind of a pretty scary story over there. And then I know that our friend Dan here was involved with Friendster, who in the end didn't have many friends. I mean, was such a great guy. So a lot of failure, and a lot of these are big VCs and big names and, you know, previously successful investors. And if you're an entrepreneur, here's a slide that's really important. This is the failure rate, how long it takes for startups to fail. As I mentioned, my previous startup took 5 years to fail. Let me tell you, I wish I'd failed earlier. I wish I'd failed in the first year, because at that point, we had 8 employees and we'd gone through about $1 million. I could have probably brushed that loss off. After 5 years, we were up to 70 employees and gone through $25 million. So the pain curve increases a lot. So one of the messages is you really want to fail early. You know, and it's tough. It's like admitting your baby is ugly. You just had a baby. You're as beautiful and symmetrical, right? But when your product, you have to say, nobody wants my product. And we're going to talk about this today because it's tough. And but to help you around, you know, this is one of my favorite movies. And there's a scene where it says, I love the smell of napalm in the morning. Again, probably politically incorrect, but I modified to, I love the smell of failure in the morning because it smells like success in the afternoon. So you really have to learn to fail and fail well. So failure now beats apocalypse later. So if you're depressed by now, I would say, ouch. Whether you want to be a startup entrepreneur or an innovator, the data goes against you. In a court of law, you're innocent until proven guilty. In the law of the market, your product is going to be a miserable flop until you can provide evidence to the contrary. So, are you with me so far? Good. Now, the next question is, gee, thanks, Alberto. Can you lift us up? Why do most products fail so we can avoid it? So, again, I went back, did a bit of analysis, and I was able to put failure in 3 main categories. Failure due to launch, meaning marketing screwed up. That's engineering points the finger at marketing. Failure in operation, marketing points the fingers at engineering. And failure in premise. Failure in launch means, you know, you kind of screwed something. When launching operation doesn't work, failure in premise means that people are just not interested in the product. Now, if you had to guess, which one do you think is responsible for the overwhelming majority of failures? Premise, by far. You know, again, that magic 80% number that sounds like a fake number, but that's actually it. And the thing is, you can fix the launch, you can fix the operation, but if you build the wrong product, there's no amount of tweaking that will actually fix it. So I don't have any tattoos on my body. If I had, I would tattoo this on my forehead. Make sure you're building the right it before you build it right. So this has become my mantra, and it's a slogan of Pretotyping. And by the way, it's a great photo opportunity. So I'll stand on stage here. This will go on my grave. I don't think unless I come up with something better.
Half in the light. Get in the light.
The other light.
All in the light, yes. All right.
Hey, one more.
One more? Okay, thank you. Okay, so now that I've depressed you, we're going to start lifting you up. How do you know that you have the right it? First, let me tell you what not to do. Do not ask. And I mean that literally, right? Because when you combine ideas and questions, you run into very dangerous territory. Here's why. Ideas live in a place I like to call thought land. So in thought land, all you have is an idea. And if I have an idea and I give it to you, what's the most you can give back to me?
An idea.
Okay, you give me back an opinion, right, on my idea. Now, ideas are subjective, opinions are subjective and abstract. So actually, they're both abstract, just opinions are subjective. So by the time my idea goes through the ether into your brain, you probably have your own interpretation. So they're both abstract and subjective. And you know, it seems like a pretty harmless place, but in reality, it's where most companies and most new products go to die for two reasons. First of all, in Thoughtland, every idea can be seen as a winner. Now, some of you that have been around a while may remember Webvan during the bubble. It was a big thing. They raised a ton of money, initially $120 million. They built refrigerated warehouses. Their pitch was pretty simple. You know, they ordered groceries online the way you order books online, and we'll deliver to your door within 30 minutes or so. So who wouldn't want that? I mean, who here actually enjoys going to Safeway? You know, it's not exactly a okay, yeah, but it's not exactly a thrilling experience, you know, and not as bookstores actually enjoy going to, and I miss them. So, but most people said yes, even if I enjoy going to the supermarket, I actually would use it. So gave them thumbs up, yes, yes, nice, even Borat, nice. I don't want to go to the supermarket. That's my own impression of the day. So on the strength of everybody saying yes, 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 they raised initially $120 million, they built huge refrigerated warehouses. I had like 3 or 4 friends that were constantly recruited by Webvan. You could see all these vans being hired, they were hiring everybody. Over the period of, I don't know, 3 or 4 years, they raised some $850 million. And then they launched. How many people here regularly order groceries online today? Okay, I would say estimate like less than 5%, right? Whereas people who raised their hand initially was like 25%. So this is what I call a false positive. You overinvest in the wrong it because everybody gives you, in Thoughtland, gives you thumbs up. So pretty bad. The other part is that in Thoughtland, every idea can be a loser. Now I want you to be honest. The first time you heard about Twitter, how many of you thought, this is going to revolutionize the way we communicate? It's okay, yeah. So some people have the foresight. You know, most people I know, including me, say, I don't get it. This is really flash in the pan. 140 characters. Who came up with this lame idea? Some people still don't get it. I get complained. I cannot watch a damn TV program without having some boring, some inane hashtag on it. So clearly, when it was originally presented, the reaction was not that positive. But you cannot argue that Twitter is incredibly successful. I mean, look at it today. You know, people are being begged, please tweet about it. So this is what I call a false negative. So here's the problem. If you're in Thoughtland and you get thumbs up or thumbs down, you don't know if they're going to be false positive or false negative. And a big part of that is that, first of all, they're subjectively interpreting your idea. They have no hands-on experience, but also they have no skin in the game. There's nothing, if somebody comes to me with an idea, said, yes, it's good, yeah, quit your job, do your startup, there's no skin in the game. And if you have no skin in the game, what you collect is not data. That's my take. It's just an opinion and pretty much worthless. So here's where Pretotyping comes in. I realized in order to fail early, not to eliminate failure, because you cannot get around the law of failure, but you want to fail early, you have to get out of Thoughtland as soon as possible. And you want to move from the world of opinions to collect actual data. And the way you do it is that you, instead of presenting people idea, you build pretotypes, because with a pretotype, instead of asking a question, would you do that, you can actually solicit an action, a tangible action, and you can collect real data. So we've been very patient. I tossed around this new term, pretotyping, without defining it, and now it's time to finally describe what a pretotype is. And I'll give you the example that made me think about them in the first place. About 30, 35 years ago, IBM, who once thought there is only a world market for 5 computers, because who would want computers except large government, thought everybody should have a computer. But if you can manage to go back 35 years ago, most people didn't type. I mean, who typed 35 years ago? Who knew how to use a keyboard, and type pretty fast? Secretaries, programmers, or writers. A bunch of losers as far as IBM was concerned, right? It's like the mall cops and the lazy tourists. That's not an interesting market. They want to reach everybody. So they figured, well, unless we kind of figure out the speech-to-text technology, there's no way that in the year 2015, people are going to be using a keyboard. Of course, that would have cost a lot. In those days, even the most powerful computer couldn't do speech processing. But they still wanted to learn, right? Somebody thought, well, before we bet, shouldn't we do an experiment? Because all these people are telling us, bet big on this technology. Of course, we'll buy a speech-to-text workstation for $10,000. So they did something very clever. They brought in all these people that were giving them thumbs up, put them in a room with a screen and a microphone, and told, no keyboard, and told them, look, we have a prototype speech-to-text. Would you mind using it? And tell us what you think. And so people started dictating, dear Mr. Jones, so and so. And the text appeared magically on the screen, and it was just appear perfectly, no typos, very fast. Of course, there's no way that that could have happened. So what was really going on? So behind the curtain, that a stenographer, those amazing people that can type as fast as you can speak with a pair of headphones, who transcribe everything. Had you heard this example before? No. It's a pretty good one, right? Because as an engineer, if you come to me and say, Alberto, we need a prototype of speech-to-text, I would go, a block to fries, and I would start buying hardware and hiring engineers. So when I heard this example, something kind of flipped inside my brain. It made me realize that I've been doing a lot of things wrong. And to me, when something is different enough, it deserves its own term. So since I like to play with words, so the first term I came up with was pretendotype. Why? Because they were pretending to have built something to see how it would actually work in the real world. But that word somehow never stuck. So fortunately, the smaller word pretotype came out, and that did manage to stick. So why was this so important? Because when they asked people for their opinion, thinking, would you want to learn how to type? Remember, 35 years ago, are you willing to learn how to type like a secretary, like a programmer, in order to use a computer? What do you think most people told them? No. I watched Star Trek, Star Wars, 2001: A Space Odyssey. People talk to their computer, computer, do something. So nobody actually was typing, except in Alien, who's a better movie than all of those put together, and that a low budget so that to have keyboard. That's my thing. So in Thoughtland, most people thought, yes, of course we want to speak to computers. Nobody's going to actually want to type. However, after using it, if you ever try to use speech-to-text for an extended period, your throat gets sore. Imagine all of you, instead of typing, talking to the computer, plus you cannot dictate confidential things like, fire Bob or I love you Jane, or kind of gets pretty awkward. So this is great, and it's great because it allowed them to fail fast. And this is important because the more money and time you spend on an idea, the harder it is to admit failure and retrace your steps. So do you remember my second startup? I was in it for 5 years and $25 million. Okay, I have to be honest, by the second year, I kind of knew this is not selling as well as we thought, despite all the awards and the fact that it worked great. However, I come from Italy, and in Italy, somebody gives you $15 million and you don't return it. There is some concern. Plus, for every 1,000 miles you move away from Silicon Valley, east, west, north, or south, failure becomes more of a stigma. In Italy, in Europe, and the further east you go in Europe, the more failure is taken seriously. If you move east, there are some countries, if you fail, they just give you a knife and say, well, you know what to do. Failure is fun. If I'd known then what I knew now about pretotyping, I would have been able to test a key hypothesis that would have told me this product will never work in a matter of weeks and maybe fail in at most a year, probably more like 6 months for a fraction of the money. So failing fast is something that prototyping helped with. And I want to give you another example of how it can help you on the opposite side, or instead of saying, this is a bad idea, that this is a great idea. Some of you may have owned one of these. Jeff Hawkins, one of our best inventors and entrepreneurs. His previous startup, Grid, was not exactly a smashing success. In fact, probably I think he wasted as much money as I did when it was launched with the Grid pad. So when he had the idea for the Palm Pilot, he, probably like me, and like many others, he didn't want to repeat the experience. So I thought the following. Before, I thought I knew what I wanted. This time, let me make sure, My hypothesis now is that if I make it something small that I can carry in my pocket or my shirt pocket, I would actually carry it and I would use it. So that was the first hypothesis, a form factor. The second hypothesis was, well, actually, he didn't really know exactly what he would use it for. He kind of suspected maybe for taking appointments and, in an address book. So, as you know, he went and cut a block of wood in his garage, put some paper sleeve, went around with a toothpick, and went around pretending that this thing was actually working. In fact, it was just a block of wood. So, Luca, you mind playing along with me? Say, hey, Luca, are you free for lunch next week?
I don't know, I need to check.
No, I'm the one with it. It doesn't exist yet. You say yes.
Yes.
What day is good for you?
Wednesday.
Okay, everybody says Wednesday. So he pulls out this block of wood and says, okay, I'll meet you Wednesday at, Pizza Uno. No, it doesn't exist anymore. So Pizza 20 or 2020. So, and you probably look at me and say, Alberto's gone off, the edge. He's picking on a toothpick. So, but what did Jeff Hawkins learn by doing this? First of all, it's a perfect example of pretendotyping because he was pretending to have built it, right? He was filling in with his imagination. He learned two things. First of all, the form factor, unlike the Grid pad or the Newton, he would actually carry it. It fits in the pocket. In fact, it's a form factor for all the smartphones that we have today. He would actually carry it. Now, we talked about the Newton. I had both the Palm Pilot and the Newton. The Newton was kind of this long, this thick, and unless you have cargo pants and thighs like Arnold Schwarzenegger, you look very awkward walking around with it. So, that just didn't work. So form factor was the first one, the thing you learned. The second one, just by using it, you realize, look, 90% of the time, I would do these four things, right? Schedule appointments, so I need a calendar, an address book, maybe a little to-do list, and a notepad. Remember, basically. At the same time, the Newton did faxes and sent emails and did all kind of amazing things and didn't go anywhere. So this is also a very good example, not only of how you can see if something is the right fit, but also to differentiate between prototyping and prototyping. Most people like prototyping. If I do get some flack, it's because people think I just wanted to invent a new word, which frankly I did, and it's pretty cool, and if you could do it, I highly recommend it. Because then you can buy the domain for $5 instead of paying somebody a lot of money. But other than that, to me it's very important because, especially if you're an engineer, if I tell you, go build a prototype, that's the first thing I think of, right? I go to Fry's, I get some soldering iron and some chips, and I start to build things. So at some point, you will get fun to build a prototype, but a prototype tries to answer a question like, can we build it? How will it work? How long will the batteries last? Before you answer those questions, if your time and career is important to you, it's important to answer the other question, like, would we use it? Would other people use it? More importantly, I always like to believe, would I use it, right? If I built a device and I don't use it, then I probably cannot assume that other people will want it. So with prototyping, you don't escape the law of failure. That's why I called it a law, but you use it to your advantage. And this is what happens. Without prototyping, you try a few ideas, you have slow failures, a few successes, and you miss a lot of opportunities. Like if you are, somebody came with you with a Twitter idea or some of these other ideas that should have never worked, you just say, sorry, go away, it's never going to work. When you prototype, you fail, but it's a different type of failure. Just like there is good cholesterol and bad cholesterol, there's good failure and bad failure. Fast failure is good, right? It kind of cleanses your system, it teaches you what to do and what not to do the next time. So it has the net effect of giving you more successes, and more importantly, you don't miss opportunities, right? For those of you who are, let's say, in a management position at a large company, if one engineer comes to you bright-eyed and bushy-tailed with a crazy idea, if you tell them, this is stupid, go away, what would happen? I did it twice. I left and did my own startup, right? With prototyping, you could say, all right, Mark, it's kind of out there. However, here's $1,000, this weekend and take 3 days next week, kind of prototype and let's see what you come up with. Let's see if you can give me some data. So that's what I want to focus on. Now I want to give you some example of prototyping in action and then give you 2 or 3 challenges so you will see if you can kind of got it. Gmail. So Gmail is one example where Google actually, we didn't have the word prototyping then, but actually did that. Gmail started because a Google employee was trying to look for a particular email in, I think it was Outlook, and he typed it and it took forever to find the email, and he thought, look, if I can search the web in a matter of minutes, how come, in fraction of a second, how come it takes Outlook so long to find a freaking email? So he kind of created his own thing, and he just started to spread it very slowly inside the company. I don't remember all the details because it was a long time ago, and I wasn't paying a lot of attention because who knew it was going to be so big, right? But I can probably expect and guess what the discussions were. Hey, I have this great idea, Eric, Larry, Sergey for Gmail, and they probably said, look, what does a large company say? No, we have to stay focused, right? Search and ads, it is just a distraction. But he kind of continued, and eventually a lot of people were using it inside, so it showed traction. And then it became the official way that we did mail at Google. And then if you remember, it was in beta for a long time, right? It was first invitation only, then in beta for way long time, and then eventually kind of came out of beta. So a very gradual, nobody assumed success, actually we assumed failure wasn't our right thing, and it turned out to be successful. When we didn't follow the prototyping playbook, you get something like Wave. So Wave, to our smartest engineer, the Rasmussen brothers, who were responsible for Google Map, they kind of went to Larry and Sergey and Eric and said, hey, give us $20 million, we're gonna revolutionize the way email is done again, and we're gonna go to Australia, kind of batten down for a couple of years, and then we'll emerge before Google I/O, and we're gonna launch this, and it's gonna be great. Remember, it was a big hoopla. It was the most visible thing everybody wanted at that time. Well, those of you who used it, it came out instead of going through this dog fooding process, as we call it. It came out, it launched, still by invitation, but it was a big launch, and people used it once or twice, and then it didn't go anywhere. So they kind of violated the playbook. Now it's interesting to think, Google Glass. I'm on leave from Google, but it's very interesting to observe how we kind of learn and internalize the lessons. Because remember, the challenge, especially if you're an entrepreneur, the challenge is never building things. If you ask a VC, they will never tell you, oh, this company failed because they couldn't build what they said they were going to build. They usually fail because they build the wrong thing. So there was never any doubt in people's mind that you can go from the first prototype, or whatever, with a backpack to something that is relatively fashionable, and eventually it will be invisible. Although I must say, this is my favorite prototype for Google Glass from a friend of mine that couldn't get a license, so he kind of improvised by putting a tablet in his field of view, because he wanted to know what would I do with a tablet with his field of view. So the question was never could we build it, is what are some of the things we don't expect, like the famous social reaction to sitting in front of somebody with Google Glass. So right now they just pulled it off the market, and it kind of just shows that we don't assume victory. We're taking very, very careful steps. So I want to give you a sampling of prototyping techniques with their name, and then let's do 3 or 4 exercises. The mechanical Turk, that's what IBM did, right? Suppose your application, you have an application where you can take a photo of your plate and it tells you all the nutrition and stuff, and it has some amazing AI, etc., etc. Before you go and develop that, can you simulate it, by having a human behind the curtain like the mechanical Turk? Apparently, Intuit. Anybody from Intuit here? Oh yeah, you were at Intuit. Yeah, so you were everywhere. Friendster, Intuit. Right. So here's an example that I've been told. You're familiar with TurboTax. Your taxes are due in about 2.5 months. So hope you're on top of it. But most people have very simple taxes. So Intuit for taxes and banks for depositing checks, they had this model. Say, why can't they just take a photo of the W-2 or the checks and just do stuff like that? The question was never, can Intuit build optical character recognition, the software to automatically do tax return based on the photo of the W-2? The question is, would people feel comfortable for doing it? So as I've been told, because I didn't work at Intuit, they just did a mechanical Turk. They allowed some people to take the photo, and then that real live human accountants do it to validate the hypothesis, would people actually use the service? And I don't know if anybody uses this. No, who's will? Oh, you use this? You just take a, not TurboTax, the one with the photo?
Yeah.
Yeah, you have a simple, no stock options, no property. No, no, I'm kidding. Because usually in Silicon Valley, say, look, if your taxes are that simple, you have to work harder,
But you
Luca.
can get started.
This is fine if you work at McDonald's.
You can get started.
Yes, no, I know, yes. So I make fun of it because we're Italian, so we can take this free. Plus you made the mistake of sitting in the front row. Pinocchio, that Pretotype, that's what Jeff Hawkins did. Pinocchio was a puppet who pretended to be a boy. So sometimes can you just pretend with the form factor? I use this a lot. Pretend I could do this. Would actually do it. And then we come to my favorite and the most, in a sense, controversial, the fake door. So as you remember, I was kind of put in charge of this team doing AdWords, and at the time, Google had like 15 engineers on that, and I was allocated 0.5 QA people. And this was the only product Google had where people actually had to pay with their credit card. So I thought, if I screw up, I'm in big trouble. So I thought, well, we have to test it ourselves. How do you test AdWords? Well, we pick up some AdWords, and then you buy some ads, and you have a landing page, and you just test the cycle. Except I wanted to come up with AdWords that wouldn't collide with actual searches. So with my team, we had some people in half the room that would say a word like beer, and the other half of the room would say dog. So we say, okay, beer for dog. Nobody's going to search for beer for dog. So we ask for that, and we have a landing page, beerfordog.com. Another one was Michael Bolton Barbie doll that I remember. Would anybody search for Michael Bolton Barbie doll? Nah. So our data would not be corrupted. So and then we had the fun landing page, etc., etc. Now here's the interesting thing. Looking at the logs, apparently some people search for Michael Bolton Barbie dolls and beer for dogs, or somehow they land there. So at that point, and it's something we take so for granted right now, but you have to go back some 8, 10 years ago, I had this epiphany. I thought, I can actually test if people would be interested in a product without actually building, right? All I need is a keyword in a landing page. And that's, what I now call the fake door. I didn't invent the term, but it was such a good word. I think another entrepreneur, Jesse Helm? No, Jesse Helm. No, Jesse Helm is kind of a politician. But somebody named Jesse, I have to do my homework, came up with it, and I took the name. So I actually started to use it for my own thing. When I wanted to write a book, I thought, would anybody be interested in reading the book? But my favorite example of fake door is Zappos. So remember how Webvan, they assumed everybody would buy groceries online, and then nobody showed up. Well, Zappos, Tony Hsieh, the founder of Zappos, he knew that buying shoes online is a very different experience. Right? They have to fit, they have to kind of look good, you have to try them on. So his hypothesis was this: people wouldn't buy shoes online unless you offer free shipping back and forth. So he thought, well, let me test that hypothesis. But he didn't go out and buy a ton of shoes, right? He probably went on Google Images, grabbed a bunch of images of sneakers and stuff, and put on the website and advertised to a very small number so it wouldn't be flooded with millions of users. So in order for shoes came in, and as legend has it, he actually wrote the book on it. He went and bought the shoes retail and shipped, and kind of kept track, how many people actually, bought the shoes, how many times they would have to ship back and forth. And then he looked at the balance sheet and said, all right, brick and mortar, I would have this overhead. If I ship, I may have to ship for free back and forth 3 or 4 times. It makes economic sense. The rest is history. Is very successful, and then he was acquired by Amazon. But at the beginning was a fake door. He didn't buy a million shoes. The YouTube Pretotype is one of my favorites. If you're building something really amazing that doesn't exist, you can just give people the experience, put something up on YouTube, and see if people actually are interested and want to follow up. In fact, that's how Google introduced Google Glass. Some of you may remember the first you saw Google Glass. You didn't see the glass. You saw what the world through the glass would actually look like. Very powerful, because you can pretty much simulate anything, right? You can simulate being taller. Take this medicine and you get taller. On a video, YouTube, you can do anything. And now another one of my most controversial but most fun, I always like to show this, the Infiltrator Pretotype. So there is this design firm in San Francisco. They have this idea for something they call the wall hub. It's actually very simple, a little piece of plastic you put in the front, near your front door. You put your keys and you put your mail so you don't forget it. They would like to sell it at IKEA, but IKEA probably gets thousands of product submissions each year. So they thought, how can we move from the world of thought land of opinions, because they're going to turn it down and collect some data. So they went on eBay and they bought a used IKEA employee t-shirt. They changed the name of the product to an IKEA name. The Valhub. Got one of those big blue IKEA bags, stuff it with the Valhub, and instead of shoplifting, they shopgifted. So they look for free space on the wall, and they kind of put it up, with the price tag, making it look like a real IKEA product. By the way, in the slides there's a link to the video, so click, because the video is hilarious. And then they stood back and collected data. Would people actually buy it? So guess what? People actually did buy, and they bring it to the cashier, and then you can see the cashier looks at it and says, "Are these from here? I don't know what to do with this." So notice what they've done, right? They had the product, they put it into a store, and instead of trying to sell it with opinion, do you like it, would people buy it? They were able to go to IKEA and say, look, you may not like it, but here's the data. We went to the store in Palo Alto or wherever, we left it there for 2 hours, and 15 people brought it down and wanted to buy. So you can tell me you don't want it, but you cannot argue that people would buy. Now, I need to follow up, because I don't know if the guys have been arrested or successful. But anyway, it's a great story, and I highly recommend you watch the video. And finally, the impersonator prototype. As I mentioned, a lot of products that are launched are not completely different. They're just variation on something that exists. So you can take an existing product, put a new skin on it, and very quickly bring it to market to test the market. So here's my favorite example. Who knows what these two cars are? Right. Lotus and Tesla. So Elon Musk, one of my favorite inventors and innovators. Imagine, you go back, I don't know, 10, 12 years ago. His idea, a two-seater, $120,000 sports car, all electric. So you can imagine how well that went, right? Apparently he tried to get loans from banks, partnerships with Toyota, and everybody kind of said, you're crazy, nobody's gonna go for this. So what did he do? He bought a Lotus Elise that was pretty close, ripped off the internal combustion engine, put on an electric engine, put on a shell, and then he drove it around, and he drove it around doing what? Not asking people, would you buy it? Because that's what typical car companies do, right? If you go to a car show, you remember the Pontiac Aztek? No, okay, well, those of you really kind of
Breaking Bad.
Breaking Bad, that's right. It was kind of, they saw, hey, it's a car, it's kind of a cool minivan, and you pull it up and it has a tent, and they put it at the car show, and you ask people, hey, would you want the Pontiac Aztek? They say, yeah. Would you buy it if I build it? Yes. Then who buys it? Just drug lords, just like, it didn't kind of pan out. So he knew he couldn't ask, would you buy it? So apparently he drove it around, and he didn't ask people, would you buy it if I build it? Should I invest my PayPal fortune and throw it in this project? He said, do you like it, Luca, since I've been picking on you? Do you like this car?
Not very much. It actually drives like shit, but...
Okay, yeah, no, you Luca, you get a Ferrari. Do you like this car? Say yes. Well, do you like it enough to give me $5,000 deposit? And so when I build it, I'll put you on the waiting list.
If I can test drive it first, yes.
Okay, so, but realize how you move from the world of opinion, would you buy a hypothetical, to the world say, give me $5,000 check. Now, would you buy is not data, it's an opinion. It's pretty much worthless or misleading. To me, a $5,000 deposit is pretty good data. Right? So he collected enough of this $5,000 deposit, was able to go to the bank, was able to go to Toyota, create the partnership. And now this idea that sounded so crazy, all electric cars, now apparently in the zip codes, Tesla outsell top of the line BMW, Mercedes, and Audi combined, right? So, and again, a great prototype. So you have enough of an idea, I don't want to run out of time, so can you ready to do some practice?
Yeah.
All right. So Webvan, you've learned how not to do it. How would you do it now that you know about prototyping? Remember, they spent $120 million to just kickstart this thing. How would you do it for, say, $1 million?
Like the Zappos. Like the
Do
Zappos.
exactly what Zappos. In fact, today people say rent a van. Don't even rent a van. Use Uber, right? You can do all of these things. You don't get any inventory, and then you are able to test what is your key hypothesis, right? The key hypothesis was a lot of people would use online ordering, and as we find out, the reality is like even today, like less than 5%. So you can do this sample, say, pick 100 people, give them the best possible service, price it as cheap as possible, be super reliable. They order, beef chuck or whatever it is, and you give them filet mignon. Just make them very happy and see if it sticks. You're going to learn pretty much the same lessons. Now, for the next one, Max Spaghetti, as an Italian, you're not allowed to participate. I find this idea pretty offensive. If you have to imagine overcooked spaghetti in a styrofoam cup. Excuse me?
Get it carded.
Yep. Possibly. So, what is the simplest, most elegant prototype to validate the hypothesis that people would order Max Spaghetti at a McDonald's?
Try ramen noodles.
Okay, no. Who said put it on the menu first? I'm gonna have to come back. You're gonna have to come up here. It's good. You'll remember it.
Wait.
It will be the highlight of your career. Thank you. Because I'm demoting you to a McDonald's cashier. Very nice. All right. So, because we need to play role to understand exactly how we collect data. So, now imagine yourself. I need to buy a polyester McDonald's shirt. So, but imagine if you're wearing that in the hat. So now he works at McDonald's. He came up with the idea of prototyping Max Spaghetti, but just putting it on the menu, right?
Yeah.
And because you want to know if people would order it in the first place. Right, so let's show how we go and collect data. So I come to you and say, oh, Max Spaghetti, I would like to order that. So what do?
Sorry, we're sold out for the day.
Perfect, so step number one, fess up. What's a nice thing that you can do for me, since you tricked me?
Give you something else for free.
Perfect, when you use a fake door, give people, something, sorry, yeah, here's a $5 coupon. And what data do you collect now? You have a little ledger, what do you keep track of?
How many people order it?
You need the ratio of people that came to your desk and said, yeah, I would like Mac Spaghetti. So you can say, at the end, let's say that McDonald's, the success rate, if more than 4% people order it, it stays on the menu. Say, 15% of people are crazy enough to want to try Mac Spaghetti. So what do you have? You have what I call the initial level of interest, which is an important metric, but it's just a first metric. It's not enough, right? Because people will buy anything once. Look at late night infomercial, right? People buy knives that cut through shoes. They buy food dehydrators that take, fresh fruit and veggies and turn them into shriveled prunes and stuff. So people will buy everything once. It's no way to build a sustainable business. So you say, you succeeded, right? So your first thing, hey, you go to the boss, 15% of people would order it. So I would say, okay, great, this is the first start, but let's see if there is an ongoing level of interest. So you kind of step up, build a little bit more expensive prototype. Right, so in this case, what you would do, say maybe you offer it in 3 restaurants, right? So let's assume for 3 months to see, if people continue to buy. So let's play again that part. Yes, I would like that Max Spaghetti thing.
Okay, sure, it's $5.
$5, and so you give it to me. And then there is a key question that you need to ask me to collect a critical piece of data.
Have you ordered it before?
Exactly. And most people don't get it right. They said, would you order it again? Et cetera, et cetera. No, that's not data, that's opinion. That's a hypothetical. You need to ask, have you had it before? So that's real data. And then you have the list, say, people try, 15% of people will try it once, and then they never try it again, kind of like Mac ribs. Right? So you have your data, and you thought you had success, but you actually tested ongoing level of interest, and you saved yourself from going public with a product that would be an embarrassment when you launch. Thank you again. I return to your high-flying career. Okay, final example. Beer for dogs. All right. So before we do this, let me say something about focus groups. Remember Coke Clear, Crystal Pepsi, Coke Clear, right? So here's how that. In fact, I'm pretty sure that's how it happened. Right? Because those companies are smart. They have focus group. They have a lot of market research. So let's pretend for now that you're all, say, Pepsi drinkers, okay? You're all Pepsi drinkers, and you're at Pepsi headquarters, and could be Coca-Cola. I'm not picking on Pepsi. So I brought you in, say, hello, welcome Pepsi drinkers. You love Pepsi? Yeah. Pretty lame. You need more of it because you need more caffeine. Do you know that Pepsi has 43 colorings and chemicals, some of which may be carcinogenic, others, have side effects like maybe grow a tail? Did you know that? So I'm Alberto, I'm a kind of a pretty green guy, and I'm the product manager for Crystal Pepsi. So all the taste and bubbles of Pepsi without the colorings and chemicals that grow a tail. Now, if you had the choice, would you prefer this to the one with the chemicals?
Yes.
Yes. How many people would prefer it? So you raise the hand, and if the number is, it doesn't have to be that big, even 30%. They say, yeah, market research, we did the focus group they wanted. So based on the strength of that, they go on the shelves, and guess what? At the point of purchase, for whatever reason, because we do not know the reason, right? People don't buy. And yet the focus group would have told them, yes, people would buy.
Maybe
Just
they forgot to mention cancer for the other product.
Maybe. Or maybe, whatever it is, their plan didn't work. So with that in mind, how would you prototype beer for dogs? And by the way, there is a precedence for this. Beer companies, pretty much all the guys that want to drink beer, and they have trouble getting more women to drink beer. They try to put beer in little pink bottles and make it light. It doesn't work. So one day there were a group of people from Anheuser-Busch, and just jokingly we threw around this idea of beer for dogs, and I thought, well, that's not necessarily a bad idea. Which after a long day, could work. How many people don't get drunk alone living in your parents' basement? Get a father to drink with you. So how would you prototype this idea? Not that I'm endorsing getting dog drunk. Just an example. How would you prototype it?
Putting dog food.
Sorry, louder.
Putting dog food. In dog food.
What do you mean?
Add some of the beer components in dog food.
Okay, you could do that. Say yes.
Take some of your regular beer, like from Anheuser-Busch, put a label on it, and sell a limited number of batches on Amazon.
Good. So these are both possibility. Since we did the fake door, that's the imposter, right? You get real beer. Yes.
I put it in Safeway on the aisle.
Right.
So it's a physical shop where people would go to find dog food.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Or go. So let's combine all of this. Very good idea. You take the real beer, cheap one. Hopefully, you put dog labels. Then maybe you go to a pet store. You give $50 to the store manager. Say, hey, let's not actually sell. I want to see if people would actually buy. So you put maybe a little banner. Hey, St. Patrick's Day is coming. Don't get sloshed alone. Bring your dog along. And then just like with the infiltrators at IKEA, see if people actually go and pick it up, right? And so you collect it, and then hopefully you stop them because. There may be side effects with dogs, drinking beer. At the point, you just want to test one of the hypotheses, which some people would order it or buy it in the first place. Definitely what you don't do, which some people still would say after hearing this pitch, well, I would brew some beer and put some, beefarino taste in it or some stuff. No, that's not the point. Or people say, I would have the dogs taste it and see if they like it. And I thought, dogs drink from the toilet. They're not connoisseurs. And they don't have a credit card. So you have to go to the point of sale and see if people actually pick it up. Okay, enough fun. I don't want to run over time. So the way we do all of this is to collect metrics, right? We want to move away from the world of opinion. And I'm just going to give you very quickly two metrics that I use: return on prototyping investment, why you can't afford not to prototype. So remember Webvan? They spent $120 million, they bought the refrigerated warehouses, et cetera, and then they flopped. And then we had the prototype where we said, okay, just do it with, say, 1,000 users in San Francisco, or even 100. Spend, say, $1 million and follow for 3 months what they buy and how often they would come back. Do you think you would learn? How much would you learn with that prototype compared to the full-blown $120 million thing, percentage-wise?
85, 90%.
85, 90, or even I'm being concerned, 75%. You'll definitely, out of 1,000 that say they would, only 50 actually do once, and only 5 do it more than once, right? So 75% compared to 100% for the full-blown thing. But here's the ratio. The cost you $100 million, the other one costs $1 million. So clearly it's worth prototyping. Now, imagine if you were Webvan, and you went to the board of directors at the end of a very painful 5 years downward slide, after you burned through $850 million, and you sit at the board and say, all right, guys, what happened here? And I say, well, people said they would buy our stuff, and then they didn't. And if you're an investor, you say, you mean you didn't test that hypothesis before? So here's the excuse I got. And it was a very popular excuse in those days, and I was in those days. I was active during the bubble. It was a land grab. We had to move fast. Remember that excuse, right? So first of all, let me show you why that's not a good excuse. But before that, here's a sale of the web van assets. And if you look carefully, like a ghost, once in a while you'll see on 101 or 280, one of these vans and try to whitewash the logo. But still once or twice a year I see the logo kind of coming up as this dark reminder of that idea. So let's get back. You also save time with prototyping. So don't give me this excuse, I need to move fast. Remember IBM with the speech to text? Now, I would assume for them to build a prototype in those days would have taken at least 5 years, right? They didn't have the CPU, the power of any of those things. The prototype with the stenographer would have taken 1 month. They wouldn't have learned a bunch of things. They would have learned nothing about how to actually build, write the software, et cetera, but they would have learned, hey, people get tired because their throat gets sore, et cetera. So the prototype, they would have learned 80%. The point is with prototyping, you not only learn cheaply, you learn faster. You don't need to wait for the product to be fully blown and then you test your market hypothesis. Test your marketing and desirability hypothesis before you actually build the product. Final metric, again, in the book it's all described in more detail. Initial and ongoing level of interest. One of the mistakes people do is they think they need a big sample, but if an idea is supposed to have broad appeal, it's enough to pick, say, 1,000 or even 100 users. So invite them, for example, to try your app or the Beer for Dog or to shop for groceries online. See how many people accept your invitation. That's what I call the initial level of interest. If that's very, very low, you know that it's going to be hard to reach people in the first place, but then don't make the mistake that most people do, that if you get a high initial level of interest, as with Wave, that you can assume that the product will eventually be successful. So in conclusion, because I want to leave a few minutes for questions, to be innovative, you need some of the things I made fun of, right? You need vision, ideas, opinion, and passion. As you can tell, I haven't lost any of my passion, but here's the thing that I learned by working at Google, and this emphasis on data beats opinion, is that I need to balance, just like our brains work so well because we have the two hemisphere and they balance each other. So the next time or anytime now I have an idea and I have some opinions, I try to say, can I actually get data out of it? And when I combine these two, I get what I call the right it. Okay, looks like a photo opportunity. This is how we get the right it. So in conclusion, this was a small introduction to prototyping. There's a whole world of ideas and tools and techniques. But the good news is there's a lot that you can do to learn more. There are 2 books. They're both free or 99 cents on Amazon, since I cannot put them there for free. There's videos. Apparently, Dan, if this video came out good, we're going to have another video.
Yeah. What's the 2 different books?
Mine, Pretotype It, which you can win in the raffle today. Autograph. I stapled it personally and folded it. So printed on Google paper about 3 years ago, vintage. It's vintage, very rare. And then, of course, I offer workshops to large companies or startups because there's a lot of interesting theory and metrics that we haven't had time to discuss. So I want to thank you, and hopefully we have a few minutes for questions. All right, yes, hi.
You mostly give examples of new products. When it comes to existing product and it's like a web or a mobile app, isn't it just easier to actually build that additional feature if it's an existing product, or would you think about prototyping it as well?
Good, so the question is, suppose you have an existing product, right? I don't know, an app,
Calendar app or anything.
yeah, a calendar app. Isn't it easier to just add the option? Well, let me tell you, I've been an engineering VP and director for many months. Most of the time you spend time adding features, and guess what? A lot of the time the features that are requested, people request them and then never use them. So you could say, yes, you could build it, but anything you build, then you have to maintain, test, and upkeep. So, because you have to assume most new features are not going to be as successful as you think, just maybe you put it on the menu, and when people click on it, you say, oh, sorry, this is not implemented. If you really want this, send us a note why you would want it. And then you keep track of how many people click on it and how many people actually take the time to articulate why they want it and use that as a metric of desire. Another trick I use is sometimes I remove items from the menu, and if nobody complains, they just stay out. And there's nothing for me. I like to write code, but it even feels better to just delete code so I don't have to test it. Thank you. Other questions?
Sometimes we see a product is very popular, but as it grows, the popularity kind of things, and there's no specific reason why it's failing. How do we make any sense of it?
Yeah, so the question is, sometimes you see a product, it grows, is very popular, and then the popularity decreases. How do you maintain the popularity? Well, prototyping is about making sure it's kind of the right it at the beginning. I would say all products kind of have a lifetime, and as in, what was that floppy fish game? There was,
Floppy Bird.
Floppy Bird. Look, some products have an actual built-in lifetime, and I'm sure that some entrepreneurs are happy to do that. But how to keep a product that's successful going? I would say you have to innovate and you have to add new features and the right features, and for that you need to keep prototyping, because once the metrics start to go down, try to add things and experiment. Yes?
So, we're going to do the microphones, guys, so we can hear it real quick. All right? One sec. Natalie's got it. I'll do this one.
All right.
So most of your examples were like hardware or services, products in a store.
Spaghetti.
But yeah, what about like actual, websites or software where, it's hard for people to try it out unless you actually build a prototype. How do you do a prototype for software? Is it just balsamic mock-ups, but then they don't really use
Well,
it?
yes, I wish I could show you. Now, I'll try to get permission for. There was this startup that an idea for a product was, kind of web-based, just a service, and the guy asked me, "Can you help me hire, 8 engineers and launch and spend $130 million, etc., $1.3 million, whatever?" I said, "Look, let's do a prototype. What's your customer acquisition model?" I said, "Well, we buy Google and Facebook ads, and we expect to pay $25 per customer acquisition." So I said, "Look, let's just use, maybe balsamic, do a fake door website that looks very polished, but there isn't any backend." Right, so let's suppose you have a dating site for dogs, since we're using dogs example, right? You could just announce and say, "Hey, your dog gets lonely, does he hump your legs too much? Shouldn't you try to get your dogs a mate?" So you buy the ads, and then the website make a few pages look beautiful, and they say, "If you'd like to sign up, click here, and if you have a price." And then when they click, you kind of keep track, and this will show you the funnel. Say, I spend $1,000 in Google or Facebook ads, and you get 10,000 clicks, and out of those 10,000 clicks, 5 people actually sign up. Then you kind of have your answer that your initial level of interest is pretty low. So it pretty much applies to everything. If you're a developer, what can you do without writing any code? If you're a hardware guy, what can you do before you solder or stick together anything?
Actually, I have a question about the Google Glass example. Does that qualify as prototype? Because it was quite functional. It was not like it was big. It was a backpack, but like, does it qualify? Or
Well,
is that a prototype?
you haven't seen the very, very, very early prototype. Yeah, and by the way, don't get if you like the word prototyping, which I hope you do, use it, but don't get stuck. You can call it a prototype, call it an early prototype, or a rapid prototype, or a mock-up. The word doesn't matter. The point is, you don't assume success and do everything in very gradual steps.
Right. So I use prototype as in like non-functional prototype. Like, is it even possible to test that as a non-functional prototype?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. I would use the Pinocchio, what Jeff Hawkins did. I thought, okay, if I have something in my field of view, like right now, what would I want to do? It'd be fun actually to record this audio. So this would be a very good example. So just like Jeff Hawkins did with a block of wood, I can do here with the glasses, just pretending. I could just touch it and say, "Oh, let me look at your badge so I remember." Okay, Luca. So you could do a lot with that.
Actually,
Well, boy, a lot of questions. You tell me when to stop. I can go all night.
I have a mic.
Yes, Mike. You got the power.
You have to wait for the mic, guys. Go ahead.
Good. So, in the context of what you define prototype, it sounds like creativity is a huge component. So I would almost say that you are allowing us to, inside a minimal viable product, we should add a big component of creativity to be able to define a better way to market something really quick, right? Part of the minimal viable product, is that?
Yeah, again, minimum viable product, that's another term, right? Prototype, minimum viable product. I really don't get stuck. Actually, when I teach my workshops at Google, I give them a copy of the Lean Startup. So, at least from my point of view, there's no competition. It's like, this problem, so many people are screwing it up, that the more people, whatever term they're using, I'm just happy. I don't want people to screw up. Eric Ries had the same scene as I did. Successful startup, failed startup. Why did I fail? I built it right. I just built the wrong thing. So it's beautiful when people come to the same kind of conclusion. Yes, so there is a huge amount of creativity. It allows to test your ideas, and it's actually fun. Yeah, I'm not sure exactly what the question is, but yeah, it's a very creative endeavor.
I think you're referring to basically a pitch, a Kickstarter type initiative where you're pre-selling something and you're testing it whether there's going to be a response and people will be able to invest in it before it comes out.
Well, good question. So it brings in Kickstarter. So let's address that. So first of all, the Kickstarter model is just one of the prototype, right? What Jeff Hawkins did with the wood pound pilot, that has nothing to do with Kickstarter, right? He was trying to convince himself what he would do with it. But since you bring up Kickstarter, people say, is Kickstarter great for prototyping? I would say, yes, with the following caveats. One is, if you put it on Kickstarter, you have to be ready for the world to kind of, buy in, and you have to be semi-legitimate. You must know that you can actually build it. Then you may be on the hook to actually deliver it. For some companies, they want to be a little bit more conservative. They don't want to share to the whole world. Maybe they don't want to come out half-baked. So in that case, you can do smaller prototypes. Kickstarter is just basically broadcasting to the whole world. I would recommend that after you've done some of the earlier prototyping steps. And by the way, I don't have time to show you today, but I practice this. Actually, I have ideas that I want to launch on Kickstarters and things, and I go through exactly all the steps I described. Yes? Who's got the mic? He got the mic.
So I think I had the same question. Is there a distinction you make between prototype and MVP?
No,
it's the same thing? Same concept?
Well, look, to me, MVPs, minimum viable products, very, very popular. I mean, Eric is great. The prototyping is a different word. Frankly, if I'd done prototyping after reading his book or meeting Eric, which I met, maybe we would have come up with one term. To me, in my little world, an MVP is a type of prototype. It's a pretty advanced prototype, right? A lot of my prototypes are not viable, and they're not products. Just like in Jeff Hawkins' example, it's a block of wood, or like in the IBM example, right? It's a mock-up. IBM would never plan to have a small race of stenographers that they could shove inside machines so you could feed them crackers with the floppy slot. Yes.
I would actually say that to qualify as a prototype should not be viable, because otherwise it would be too much.
Possibly, yeah. Who's got the mic?
I got the mic here.
You got the mic, sorry, you didn't trump by the mic.
I wonder if you have encountering examples of prototyping when your market is enterprise, where maybe you're encountering some more risk-averse procurement.
Yeah, of course. So this is a common question. How do you prototype in B2B? It's one thing to do for Max Spaghetti, but what if you have 5 customers? Like say, Dow Corning with Gorilla Glass, or some of those things. Well, the principles are the same. If you ask enterprise company, they fail, a lot of them fail for the same reason. My second startup was an enterprise software startup. People tell us we would buy, and then we build it, and they don't buy. So the only thing that you probably wouldn't do in an enterprise model is to use the fake door, because especially if you have 5 customers, you don't want to screw with half of them. So what you would do though, and I do this all the time, you bring, even though it's B2B, remember, at some point there is always a C, right? So, like Corning, Gorilla Glass from Apple, but Apple, is one of maybe 5 companies, but then they have, millions of users. So you try to get both of the B companies in the same room, you teach them about prototyping, and so you test together the hypothesis, right? And I'm making this example, I don't know anything about Corning or Gorilla Glass or Apple, so I'm just came out, that's what comes up at 8 p.m. So we say, look, we think if we have this magic Gorilla Glass that, at night turns a little darker so you don't wake up when you turn on the thing, you think people would use it? Yes. So, it costs you an extra $20. Is it worth building? You kind of prototype with some of the users, either internally or externally, because at some point, or even if it's what's the biggest enterprise application software you can think of, like Oracle or SAP, right? It's all about features. Everybody says, I want this feature. I said, well, eventually the feature is going to be used by human beings, by 1,000 programmers or database administrators. So try to use the same process.
Let's do 2 more questions and then we'll wrap
What
it up.
if-
Go ahead.
So we're building something and we're focusing on getting our app, which is the product, into the Apple App Store by end of March. We have not prototyped yet. How would you prototype an app when?
Can you say what your app does?
It's a patient portal that's going to help people download medical records.
All right. So first of all, big in your mind should be the law of failure.
Yeah.
Now look at the statistics. Millions of apps in the App Store. 99% of them don't make a penny. So the odds are against you. And even the ones that actually get downloaded and make a penny, most of them are not used. I rarely go past my first page. So the odds are definitely against you, and you should prototype it. Should you prototype mobile apps? Absolutely. In fact, at Google 3 years ago, that's what I did. Everybody wanted to use their 20% time to do mobile apps. So we created this little tool called Androgen that allows you to build very rapid prototypes. So you don't spend 3 months building something to find out that people don't use it. How do you prototype the app? Maybe MVP is a good thing. Try to build something that does the simplest thing for your patient, put it on the market, see if people download it, see if you can write the ads that get the interested people download it. And then the best feedback you can have is people that download it and they complain because you don't have enough feature. If you never hear from them, it means that it's never used. And with an app, you have telemetry. Every time that you turn it on, make sure that you get the data so if there is an ongoing level of interest. Okay, one more question. Who's ever got the mic? Finally, yes.
So somebody asked a question about B2B, and mine's an extension. I work for a company that makes routers and switches. Right, so it's not only B2B, it doesn't have much of a user interface. Is this one of those edge cases where you wouldn't prototype?
Okay, so good question. It's, I repeat it since the mic didn't work. They make routers and switches which don't have user interface. It's definitely B2B, and it's not one of those products that consumer really get excited and you have Super Bowl ads for. So one first thing I say, when should you not prototype? You should not prototype if you're not innovative, if there is not a new hypothesis. So for example, let's assume your new router costs half as much, is twice as fast, and consume a third the energy. Do you need to prototype that? No. So some things, just because you have a hammer, don't go and name everything. So things are improvements along a dimension that people already know. You don't need to prototype it. Now, if you have a new feature or new sales model or a new pricing scheme, you definitely can prototyping that, right? Prototyping doesn't just apply to the end product; it can apply to the process. It could apply to how you sell, to how you service, to how you do all of those things, where we make just as many mistakes as we do in the products. So it's very tough to give quick answers. Sometimes when I work with a company on a product, we spend 1 week to come up with the best prototype. But hopefully this gave you a good overview, and it was useful, and thank you so much for coming.